Inside the Law is presented to educate listeners in Monmouth and Ocean counties about legal issues. The opinions expressed by the host, guests, and phone callers are strictly their own and do not necessarily reflect those of Town Square Media and are not intended to be a substitute for personal legal advice from your own attorney.
Your questions and comments are welcome at 732-505-1160. Inside the Law, talk radio for the Jersey Shore.
Good morning, Monmouth and Ocean counties, and good morning to the rest of the world who's listening to us out there on the internet. This is attorney Jason Wyatt from the law firm Novy and Associates, and you're listening to Inside the Law live on 1160 WOBM AM in Ocean County and on 1310 AM in Monmouth County, as well as all over the world on WOBMAM.com. You know the format for our show. We take you inside the law to discuss an issue or topic of interest to our firm, to our clientele, and to you, the listeners. To remind you, Novy and Associates is a boutique law firm, and that does not mean we sell dresses. It means that we specialize in one particular type of law, and that law is elder law and estate planning. That umbrella covers asset protection, Medicaid planning, guardianship, trusts and estates, as well as the administration and litigation of trusts and estates. We have a great show for you in store today, and our topic today is acute rehab, and we have some folks here from Healthsouth. We're going to get into that in a minute. I just want to remind everybody, though, that it is a live show this morning, so if you want to ask a question, please feel free to call in at 732-505-1160, or if you're a little bashful, you don't want to be on the air, we also invite questions off the air. You can shoot us a question via email at info@novylaw.com, and if it's pertinent or if it's a topical question that we find interesting, we'll feature it on a future show. So this morning we have some nice young ladies from Healthsouth Rehabilitation Hospital of Toms River. We have Kristen Schreier, who is a program champion of brain injury. Good morning, Kristen.
Good morning.
And we have Jessica Heimel, who is a brain injury program co-champion. Good morning, Jess.
Morning, Jason.
Kristen has been a speech pathologist with Healthsouth Toms River since 2007. She received her master's degree from the College of New Jersey, and she is a certified brain injury specialist. Very interesting, Kristen. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions today.
Can't wait.
Jess began her career at Healthsouth in 2013 after obtaining her clinical doctorate at Drexel University in Philly. And in June of 2014, Jess became the physical therapy representative of the brain injury program and took on the role of co-champion the following February. So, Jess, I'm going to have a lot of questions for you. I don't know anything about brain injuries. I don't know anything about speech pathology. So, I know a little bit about physical therapy from a high school soccer injury. That's about it. I'm sure that's very different than what you deal with.
Slightly, but, we'll get into it.
Okay, absolutely. And so today's focus of the show, just for our listenership out there, is, as trust and estate attorneys and elder law attorneys, we have a lot of It doesn't have to be this way, but our clientele skews older, and I think it's the same for you guys. Your patients don't have to be seniors, but is it fair to say that that's the bulk of who the patients that come through the hospital?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay.
For the most part, 65 and up is where we see most of our patients, but we have as young as 18 years old.
Yeah. Okay. So that's that. I was going to say we all skew older. You don't have to be old to need a will, and you don't have to be old to have a brain injury, but that's a real big overlap between our practices. And we were talking a little bit off air. I think that a lot of seniors probably go through, when they go through a health crisis, they wind up seeing you guys probably 3 to 6 months before they come see us, because they'll come to us in response to a change in health status because now they need somebody to assist them with finances, and they need a power of attorney, or they woke up a little bit to what could happen if they had another major health event and they want a living will, things like that. So, but in any event, the point is that there's a lot of crossover between what we do, and we find we're in a position as a law office to get to see the power of the services that a Healthsouth can provide to a senior in the right position. The way they recover, the way they remain autonomous, Jess, you guys had a saying. What was it about independence?
Trying to get them back to being an independent person.
Right, the independent living concept being very important to both of our organizations. Whether you're independent by virtue of having appropriate legal documents and representation and controlling your life and autonomy, or whether it's by staying healthy so that you can live where you want to live for as long as possible. So I guess that's where I'll start. And the basic question I have for you guys is first of all, Healthsouth Rehabilitation Hospital is, I guess I have some material in front of me. You guys call it a acute rehabilitation hospital that has the word hospital in the name, right? So how does that make you different from a nursing home? That's probably the question that my clients would ask me first. I could almost guarantee it.
We offer an interdisciplinary kind of approach to your healthcare, which means you don't just go in and you see one person. You know, you're going to meet 5-6 people in just one day that come from backgrounds of everything. Okay. So you're going to go in, you're going to have a doctor who's specializing in the rehab. You're going to have a nurse who's specialized in rehabilitation. You're going to meet a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, a speech therapist, a respiratory therapist. So it's really that you as the patient are the center of it, but there's a whole team approach. And we also have to guarantee you a certain minimum of therapy a day too.
What do you know what that minimum is?
It is 3 hours.
Oh, so it's hourly based. Okay. What's interesting there from your answer, Kristen, is you use the word patient, and I would focus on that's different than a nursing home where they might say resident in certain circumstances, right? Mm-hmm. So it really is a hospital then.
It is.
Right. We don't intend for our patients to be there, for a very extended period of time. We want them to be able to go back home.
Right. And how long are they typically with you guys once they get there?
Typically around 2 weeks, I would say.
Okay, so short-term stays. All right. And I know that, people worry about their kids or their somebody in their family forcing them into a nursing home. It doesn't feel like that's how you probably meet your patients. Is there a particular kind of way that they come to you most commonly, or is it all over the place? You want to? Sure.
Most commonly, we would have somebody come to us from the hospital.
Okay.
Say an acute hospital as opposed to our acute rehab hospital.
Gotcha. Okay.
Very similar. But then we also have a few other routes where people would come to us from. People can come to us directly from home.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yep.
Okay.
And people can also come to us from surgical centers or directly from the emergency room. So.
Okay. And the hospital, I guess, does it matter if they were admitted to the hospital, full time versus coming straight from an ER once you have, whatever your issue is addressed, triaged, and they get rid of you and you're never actually admitted? Is there any differentiation for you guys in terms of that, or they both are pretty common?
For us, no. As soon as somebody comes to us, everybody gets the same kind of care. Everybody gets the same intake.
Okay.
Everybody gets the same evaluations from all members of that team I spoke of earlier. Okay. So there's no difference.
So you don't
no matter how you get there.
You don't need a discharge planner to send you there. You could, go home from the ER and say, you know what, maybe I want to think about a higher level of rehab than anybody's discussed with me. So you could self-pick you guys.
Yeah, and if you're, maybe you went to the hospital and you went home and you're finding that it's too difficult for you to do your everyday tasks, your what we call our activities of daily living.
Right.
Things like getting dressed or being able to make a meal. Our occupational therapy department really works on that specific kind of thing.
Okay.
So we take people from home that are having those type of, difficulties.
Gotcha. Sometimes things that might have been unforeseen at the time they left the hospital. And I want to focus on that. People who don't work in the worlds that we work in, the term occupational therapy kind of goes in one ear and out the other. And so, I have an idea of what it is. I'm sure you guys could explain it even better, but for our listenership, occupational therapy, people hear the word therapy and I think mostly of physical therapy, of treadmills and stretching exercises and strengthening and balance exercises. But I'm sure occupational therapy is very different. You mentioned getting dressed. What are some types of things that a patient might experience during an occupational therapy session?
Sure. So occupational therapy kind of, at least from a physical therapist's perspective, I'm sure an occupational therapist would maybe give a more detailed approach.
Sure.
But So occupational therapy will work on those things that you need to do on a daily basis. So they'll take you into their, shower setup that we have at the hospital, and they'll see, are you able to get in and out of the tub or in and out of the shower over that one step? Or they'll give you some ideas for types of equipment to make that easier for yourself.
Equipment and positionings and things like that. Okay. And that's part of the 3 hours then? That
Yes.
is a minimum? Okay. So it's almost like life skills that you're learning after you have a health event.
Right.
I guess, what are some of like the health events that you guys see? Is it just strokes? I mean, I think that's what everybody thinks of. I'm sure you see more than that, though.
Absolutely. We see everything from strokes, brain injuries, total knee replacements. We
Neurological deficits of multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's.
people after spine surgeries.
Spinal surgery.
We see people with cardiac or pulmonary issues also. Those are one of our specialized programs that we have at the hospital, too.
Like COPD and things like
Yep,
that?
COPD, if you just had a heart attack, if you just had open heart surgery. We'll have those people come to our hospital to try to get their conditioning back.
Gotcha. So it really probably covers the gamut then. And if they come directly from a surgery, is there a wait time in between? Can they go straight from the hospital to you guys? Is that
as long as they're medically stable enough to be able to, do 3 hours of therapy, then there's no real wait time as long as they're cleared by medical needs.
Right.
We're good to go.
And one thing I want to point out from the literature that I've had in front of me is that the 3 hours of therapy, like we said, includes occupational, includes speech. So it's not like somebody who's thinking about, well, should I give Healthsouth a call? Needs to worry about being on a treadmill for 3 hours, because it's that multi-faceted approach that you guys talked about, right? There's different ways to get to the 3 hours depending on what you need.
Right. And part of that therapy time could include education as well, because that's a big part of the rehabilitation. Learning about what happened and learning about what to do from here on out. And we really work with each individual patient. So, we're not going to schedule you to exercise from 9 to 12.
Right.
We space it out based on your needs, too.
Right. And the exercise, it's things that you would expect to do on a daily basis. So it might be that an occupational therapist might come in from 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning and help you get dressed. Make sure that you're able to eat or groom and manage that kind of thing. And then maybe later on in the day, you would have an hour of speech therapy, where you're not maybe exercising your legs, but you're exercising your voice, if that was a deficit. Or
brain.
So, and then you do have that hour of physical therapy where we maybe make you walk a little bit and maybe get that heart rate up a little bit so that you're working on that cardiovascular system.
Absolutely. So the 3 hours is that multi-tiered approach. And it sounds like a lot of your clients patients come from hospital, either admitted stays or ER observational stays. How about coming from home? You mentioned that a little bit, Jess. How does somebody get to you from home? They just give you a ring? How do they know that you'll even accept them as patients? Is there a process in place? How does that function?
We have liaisons that will actually come to your house and tell you kind of about the process of rehab. I know some of our patients that come from home, their doctors recommend it to them. Their doctor says, you'll benefit from doing some therapy. Why don't you give Healthsouth a call, or I'll call them for you.
So it could be not just getting up off the couch, but they went to their doctor. The doctor said, you should really consider XYZ, but they're never actually going through the hospital. They're just taking a suggestion from like a primary care physician or something like that to go, okay. And the in-home, if the liaison visits you for an in-home review, are they checking to see if you're sick enough or bad enough or what have you? Are they asking you questions?
To see if or what kind of rehab you would benefit from.
Okay.
And if you're appropriate to come directly to our hospital, or if maybe, if you need to go to the main hospital beforehand, the acute hospital, like your community medical center.
Right. Right across the street from you guys.
Right. Or if it would be, more appropriate for that person to come to, our acute hospital instead.
Gotcha. So it's a question of where are you in the spectrum of your health
continuum
issue.
Of care.
Right. Yeah. Continuum of care. Exactly. And I don't know, maybe you guys are the wrong ones to ask, but if there's a cost associated with the home?
There is no cost.
Okay.
No.
I didn't think so. But, that's a big question for seniors.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't want to have to give them, big bill just to have some, medical professional come into my house and tell me if how bad I am or how good I am. All right. So let's talk a little bit. So here's the basic idea, right? You have Healthsouth as an acute rehabilitative hospital. And we've talked about a number of ways to get there, directly from an acute hospital itself, where you might have a surgery or something like that, or even if it's not to that extent, but you went to the hospital for an ER visit or wound up spending a couple of nights there for observation. And I think it's an important point to make that for our listenership out there, just because you spent a night or two in a hospital doesn't mean that you were admitted, which can be important for Medicare billing and things like that. You could be just there under observation. So as an aside, be very careful what you sign and don't sign if you're in a hospital, so that you are aware of whether or not you're admitted or not, and you can advocate for being admitted if it's a situation where maybe you're a borderline and they're trying to say that you're only observational. But for the purposes of Healthsouth, it doesn't matter. You can become a Healthsouth patient if it's going to help you, regardless of whether you were admitted or not. And then the other really two ways is kind of 2.5 or 1.5 ways is you can come straight from home, which includes, coming through your doctor's office. So a lot of different ways to get to Healthsouth, and Healthsouth then becomes a way to recover and strengthen from your acute health issue. So we've covered how somebody gets to Healthsouth. And by the way, Healthsouth, you guys are located in Toms River on Hospital Drive.
Yes,
right?
14 Hospital Drive.
14 Hospital Drive. And if anybody has any questions during the week, the number at Healthsouth is 732-244-3100. Again, 732-244-3100. And the website is rehabnj.com. And there's another facility not too far away in Tinton Falls. Is that right?
Yes, there is one in Tinton Falls.
Okay. So you've got Monmouth and Ocean County well covered that way. And I encourage anybody listening who's had their interest piqued either for their own health care or for somebody in their family to get in touch if any further questions, or to maybe schedule the in-home review or consultation to see if you're a candidate and how helpful the services can be. So somebody's admitted to the hospital through one of those four modes. And we talked a little bit about occupational. I want to talk about what you guys do individually, because I wanted to get that one occupational out of the way first, because I know neither one of you are occupational therapists. So let's talk, Kristen, first about speech pathology. What is like a typical hour for, or let's start. You're not going to see somebody probably with a knee injury, right?
No.
So let's talk about what types of injuries and health issues you see, and then, in essence, what do you do for an hour with these patients every day?
I will actually say I have seen a few patients with a orthopedic thing like a knee injury, or a hip replacement or hip fracture, because sometimes anesthesia can affect us.
I hadn't thought of that. Good
or
point.
Sometimes pain medicines,
Sure,
make
okay.
people, their memory's not as good or their thinking is off. Mm-hmm. So we've definitely evaluated and treated patients after being affected by medications.
Okay.
But typically, our department really does work with our neurological patients, so brain injury, stroke, Parkinson's. But there's really three kind of areas that we'll work on. Mm-hmm. So we'll do the speech. So if somebody's having trouble with their comprehension or their language, getting the words out, but then also having the words come out as clear as possible. So we'll help you with that. We also help patients with swallowing. So sometimes we can have swallowing troubles. So you might notice that you're choking or coughing a lot on liquids especially, but we can help you kind of strengthen the swallowing muscles and then kind of alter your diet and liquid textures and maybe help you with some positions for better and proper eating.
Interesting. So I've never heard of swallowing muscles before, but that's a good point out there. People don't think about this stuff. You could be at home struggling, to just eat a basic meal, and a little bit of therapy, learning a position or strengthening the right muscle could assist. You think about strengthening muscles as, the
bicep curls.
Yes, exactly. the 10 minutes in the gym, I actually don't mind compared to the treadmill. But All right. And so I interrupted you, Kristen. I'm sorry. There's
that's
a third
okay.
component.
And then cognition, so thinking. We also work on the thinking skills that you kind of use in everyday life, and then the thinking skills that you'll need to get back home.
Okay.
So remembering to take your pills,
Okay.
or completing your finances the best of your ability.
Right.
If you independently do your checkbook and that's something you want to do when you go home, we can help you with that practice, kind of give you some strategies that might help you with that as well.
Which is certainly a big part of that remaining independent sort of ethos, that concept. And Kristen, do your patients, do they lean towards older, or do you see a pretty broad range of?
We definitely see a pretty broad range. I know in terms of the brain injury team, our average age of patient is 82.
Okay.
So a little bit older than the average age of patient in the whole hospital
greater
itself.
Hospital, right. Okay. I think Paul, our sound engineer today, is signaling that we have our first caller of the day. Is that right, Paul?
Yes, we do. We have Angelina from Toms River.
Good morning, Angelina. How are you doing?
Good morning. Good morning.
You have a question for us?
Yes, I do. Do you allow personal doctors to come check on patients at Healthsouth?
I'll shoot that to the ladies. I have no idea what the answer is.
We have several internists in the area that do have privileges that come to Healthsouth, but we do have our own house internists as well. So when you come to Healthsouth, you're assigned, or you have a doctor for your rehab, so a physiatrist, but then you also have an internal medicine doctor who's also following you. So if your particular family physician does not have privileges at Healthsouth, you are still followed by one of our internists as well, and they can communicate with your family doctor as needed.
So you'll see a doctor of some type. It's possible that your family physician has privileges, and even if they don't, there's an internist that will have privileges. So either way, you're being seen by...
Either way, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Does that answer your question, Angelina?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much, and you've been very, very helpful.
Thank you for the call. Have a great Saturday.
Great. You too.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. You just used a word, Kristen, that I don't know what it means. Physiatrist?
Physiatrist.
Physiatrist.
Yeah.
Tell me what a physiatrist is.
So it's a doctor who specializes in rehabilitative medicine. So they're really going to be the person or the doctor that you would see after requiring some type of therapy or rehab. Yeah.
And how does somebody find a physiatrist outside of a place like Healthsouth? Would they only run into a physiatrist through you guys? Or
for the most part, they only really work in rehabilitation hospitals, to my knowledge.
I know some of our physiatrists do have their own private practices.
Right. Okay, so they do.
So,
okay.
But you'd most likely probably need to be referred by your orthopedist or by your family doctor.
Gotcha. See, I'm learning so much today. I learned a whole new new word and a whole new type of medical specialty. So
there's a quiz later.
Oh, gosh. I use that joke with my clients. I tell them there's going to be a quiz a week later, and they all get very scared and look at me. So, no, my days of quizzes are done. Too much school. I'm sure you guys can relate. So what I want to point out to our listenership out there, there's a whole world, I guess, within the rehabilitative concept. It's kind of a newer sort of thing. I mean, people they've heard of physical therapy, but even the other forms of therapy, if we've had them for 20 years, that doesn't mean that everybody's so used to the concept. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows, you go to a hospital for a surgery, but going to an acute rehab hospital after that for strengthening and relearning life skills and learning how to, swallow, for example, that's a whole new different world. And I like to point out to my clients a lot of the time, our listenership, that, as you age with independence, you're going to draw on life experiences from your own family, your own youth and so forth, but you're not in the same world as you were 20 years ago with your parents or 40 years ago with your grandparents. There's a lot more options out there, and we're lucky enough to live in a world, and especially in New Jersey, a populated state where a lot of services are available, where there are not just one Healthsouth, but there's actually, I think, 3 in New Jersey.
You got it. Mm-hmm.
And one of, if not the biggest acute rehabilitative hospital systems in the country. And I think there's even a couple all up and down, was it 30 plus states? You have
29 states.
29 states.
And Puerto Rico.
There's your 30. And Puerto Rico. So it's a growing part of the healthcare system. And just because it's new and different doesn't mean people should be scared of it. If anything, I encourage our listenership out there to research this kind of thing. Have in the back of your mind, even if you're healthy as an ox, that someday if you're in a hospital, the possibility of having a step between discharge and home where you could strengthen yourself and go home and be closer to your old self, maybe even stronger than your old self. You've got to advocate for yourself as a patient a lot of the time. If your doctor isn't into it or is maybe old-fashioned or doesn't know the services that a place like Healthsouth could provide, then you may not wind up there just because somebody's funneling you there. You've got to be your own advocate. And I teach my clients that, if you want to remain independent, age in place, or age with autonomy, you've got to be your own advocate first and foremost. Part of that's being proactive and coming and seeing an attorney and doing, getting appropriate documents in place, getting a disaster plan in place. So part of it would also be advocating for yourself to make use of kind of these newer, cutting edge health concepts like acute rehab.
Right.
All right, so I'll get off my high horse for a minute, but I like to point that out because I think we have the same focus
you have a good point there.
Yeah, that it's part of that autonomy and that independence is take control, question what do I have other options? Is there another way I could handle this health scare, this issue that I'm facing? Just a reminder to everybody listening that today is a live show. You're listening to Attorney Jason Wyatt from the law firm Novy & Associates on Inside the Law here on 1160 WOBM AM in Ocean County and on 1310 AM in Monmouth County, as well as all over the world on WOBMAM.com. I know I've got a couple of clients who listen to me from Florida, my snowbirds. As well as some friends from law school I know that once in a while tune in from Ohio. So you can listen to us when you're on vacation. You can listen to us during the winter if you escape the cold and snow of New Jersey. Hopefully not as bad as last winter this year, but we'll see. And if you have any questions or you did miss a show because you were away, I want to point out that the shows are always reposted on our website at www.novylaw.com. So you can re-listen to a show. And after all, to some extent, this is free, legal and medical advice that you're getting, which is hard to get outside of the context of a radio show. So go ahead and re-listen to today's show if anything's interesting to you, or if you didn't totally understand a section, you could jot down notes or give Healthsouth a call during the week, which is again is 732-244-3100. At rehabnj.com, or for us at Novy & Associates, 732-657-0600 or novylaw.com. And again, we're live today if you want to call in during the show. 732-505-1160 is the call-in number. So follow-up question, or really same question to you, Jess, the physical therapy component of the 3+ hours that a patient might receive at the hospital. That probably runs a pretty broad spectrum, but give me an idea of some of the things, some of the health issues you see, and then what you do during your hour or so a day with the patient.
Sure. So for the most part, every patient that comes in the hospital is going to have physical therapy.
Okay.
So every patient that comes in is evaluated on that first day, that first whole day that they're at the hospital. So I see a range of orthopedic conditions. So people who have had knee replacements, hip replacements, spine surgeries, in addition to hip fractures. Okay. Certainly we get a lot of them.
Sure.
And then we also will see our neurological patients, so our strokes, our brain injuries, people after they fell and hit their head perhaps.
Okay.
And then lastly, we'll kind of go into the cardiopulmonary aspect that we have. So people after a heart attack or people after, they have chronic COPD, but maybe they had an exacerbation of it where it kind of got out of hand and they're coming to our hospital to see what we can do for them. So I see The whole spectrum of patients.
So basically, if they're admissible to the hospital, you're going to see them.
Yep.
Okay.
You got it.
Gotcha.
So on that first day, we take a look at, we got to get the background story, figure out what happened, how can we help you, and then we take a look at their strength. We take a look at their range of motion, which means how much can your arm move, how much can your leg move. We take a look at their balance, their endurance, and then we'll take a look at your functional mobility, which that's kind of including bed mobility, getting in and out of bed, being able to roll in bed to maybe go reach across and hit the alarm clock to turn it off.
Hit the snooze button.
Right, exactly. And then we'll also take a look at how you're walking, how you're doing stairs, things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe you see how interdisciplinary it is. Getting in and out of bed has a feel of occupational, but also obviously a very physical act.
Right,
so
right.
The way that you have to have a team approach to this stuff, I think, becomes obvious.
There's a lot of overlap, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the big things that some of actually, hang on a second. Paul, do we have another call?
Yes, we do. We have Kathy from Brick.
Good morning, Kathy. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you, Mr. Wyatt?
I'm very well.
Fine. I have an uncle that recently broke his hip, and we're thinking of Healthsouth. So what kind of paperwork do we need? Do we need an attorney to do paperwork, POAs, and things like that before admittance?
It's an extremely good idea. Is it necessarily a requirement? Probably not, although I know that a lot of hospitals across the medical treatment spectrum will ask if those documents exist. But certainly as an attorney, I would advocate anytime you're facing, or somebody in your family is facing a health scare, it should open your eyes that if it had been worse or if it gets worse, you're going to need an advocate. And in today's world, you can't rely on it may be sad, you can't rely on a marital certificate or the fact that it's your dad or it's your mom or it's your aunt or it's your uncle because of laws like HIPAA that tie the institution's hands and prevent them from being able to release information to a person who doesn't have permission. And so power of attorney will accomplish that. And certainly if you progress, if you have temporary cognitive problems or difficulties or incapacities, the need for the legal documents to be in place to have a power of attorney, and both for financial and medical purposes, I should add, Kathy, because, you can have a medical power of attorney talking to the ladies and to Healthsouth, but that doesn't mean the bills are getting paid. That doesn't mean that the insurance, premiums are being paid. It doesn't mean that your taxes are up to date, all of which can happen even during a 14-day stay, which is the average stay at Healthsouth, let alone a longer stay at a subacute like a nursing home. So that's a long, you ask a lawyer a simple question, you get a long-winded answer. But the short answer is yes, absolutely. Any kind of, health admission, any type of acute issue that comes up, especially in a senior's life. But I wouldn't just pigeonhole it to seniors. I would say anybody. It should be an eye-opener. In my perfect world, everybody would have those documents the day they turn age 18, just in case. But you see the need for them, and the need also is likely to increase when you have an acute health issue and you're going to wind up or you're going to benefit from the services of a place like Healthsouth. So short answer, yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's good. Last question.
Sure.
Do they take all health insurances?
Ladies?
We do definitely take all health insurances.
So that's all private insurances?
Yeah, we take Medicare
Okay.
and private insurances as well, commercial insurances.
Okay, terrific. So that means the services are covered. Why not, if you're admitted, why not, and they have that screening process, you're not going to wind up paying without knowing what you're in for. So absolutely.
All right, because we live in Florida, my uncle's in Jersey Shore, so it's a question of calling the social worker and have her get in contact with Healthsouth?
Right, yeah. I would contact the case manager at Jersey Shore, and then we also have liaisons that go to the hospitals as well. So at the case manager at Jersey Shore might even be in contact with someone already.
They're actually in the hospital there, and they can just
Yes.
the case manager can bring them in. Mm-hmm. And that's I think the material. So there's a couple of hospitals where you have that, right? Community.
Definitely community, and the St. Barnabas healthcare system.
The St. Barnabas system. Okay.
And Meridian, the Meridian healthcare system as well.
Okay.
All right, could you give me your phone number again, please?
Sure. 732-244-3100.
Okay, great. And the number of the firm?
732-657-0600.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Kathy. Have a great Saturday.
You too.
All
Bye-bye.
right. And Kathy brings up a good point, too, that you don't have to, you can do both of these things at once. We at Novy and Associates do make house calls. We regularly visit both acute and subacute healthcare facilities. Sometimes that's really necessary. Other times it's just preventative. And so you're in rehab minimum of 3 hours a day at Healthsouth, but there's other hours in the day where you could meet with your attorney and you have some downtime and do documents, and vice versa. Just because you've overcome the fall or the stroke and you're ready to go to the attorney's office and say, hey, we need to wake up and do some documents here, doesn't mean you're past the point where acute rehab might not assist you. It's a combination platter of what you need to do when you're facing any kind of healthcare issue like that. So that was a great call. And I think, Kristen, you want to interject? Maybe I cut you off there on one of the answers.
No, that's okay. That was a good call. I just wanted to reiterate, if we do have liaisons that come to that facility, great. But if we don't have liaisons that go to the facility you're being referred from, we do receive chart copies of your chart. So we still can
medically be informed.
Right.
Gotcha.
Medically know what's going on with your particular case.
So it just emphasizes again, there's a lot of different ways to make use of the services that a Healthsouth has as a acute rehabilitative hospital, whether it's one of being seen by a Healthsouth person representative in the hospital, whether you thought of it yourself or because a case manager or a social worker at the hospital suggested it, whether it's you think of it yourself while a patient at the hospital, whether it's once you go home. Actually, that begs a question I wanted to ask, which is, you heard that word acute and you think of right now something pressing. What about chronic conditions? Because we mentioned pulmonary and COPD. That's not acute the same way a heart attack or a stroke is. So are they still candidates for rehab? Is it something where it has to be a particularly bad month or week? Or is it just you're struggling with your COPD and maybe some more, focused rehab could assist? I don't know how.
Yeah. We've had patients come in for distinctly our pulmonary program or our cardiac program where maybe they're, doing okay with their mobility, but they need some education and they need some, helpful tips about how to do things like pursed lip breathing to, make sure that they are breathing the correct way.
Okay.
So that they don't get as short of breath. So we have the cardiac program and the pulmonary program where you go to a specific class one time a day. And in the cardiac program, you're hooked up to a telemetry unit. So they're looking at your heart rhythm as you're exercising.
Okay.
In the pulmonary program, they're taking a look at how much your lung volume is by doing incentive spirometry. So they're using
incentive
spirometry.
Okay, and that's a measure of the volume of your breath?
Yep.
Okay.
It's how much air you can take in.
Interesting.
Yep. So hopefully they like to see that go up as you work on your endurance and as you work on correct breathing techniques.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Very interesting. And what about, I forget which one of you mentioned, I think it was you, Jess, mentioned Parkinson's?
I think Krista mentioned it, but we certainly do see that in physical therapy also.
Because to me, that's like more of a chronic,
Absolutely.
Unfortunately slow, sometimes not that slow moving issue. But unlike a stroke where, obviously you just had it and you're going to go to the hospital and then you may not know when the time is right to call a Healthsouth. So is there a way that a person with Parkinson's or any other chronic condition can do that? Or is it just to keep in the back of their mind that any time they start to feel they have increased difficulty, it might not be a bad idea to have one of those assessments?
You kind of hit the nail on the head with that one. Sometimes if your medications are changed, you might notice a change in your functioning. Or sometimes, it could be, like you said, it could be a particularly bad month and you notice that, my mobility's not what it was.
Okay.
It might be good to, work on my endurance to get me back to the level that I want to be at.
Gotcha.
And a lot of times we're seeing patients who maybe have Parkinson's and they're at home doing that, dealing with that, but then they'll come in for another reason. So we're seeing them for maybe a heart attack or something like that. But they also have Parkinson's in their history.
Okay.
So It's kind of, we're working with the whole person there.
Dual diagnosis, and you've got to deal with both. Okay.
We can address all.
Gotcha. Just a reminder, everybody, you're listening to Inside the Law live today on 1160 WOBM AM in Ocean County and on 1310 AM in Monmouth County, as well as through our website at WOBMAM.com. Inside the Law is our radio show here from Novy and Associates. Every other Saturday morning, we take you inside the law on a topic that is of interest, either related to our practice of law or to our client group. And we have a couple of upcoming shows, although they are spread around the holidays, which are upcoming as well, including Mr. Novy, Bob Novy, being on the air 2 weeks from today to talk about Elder Law 101. Because elder law is a phrase that in and of itself, and today's show is a good example of that, is somewhat of a misnomer. Because while it skews towards older, seniors, you don't have to be a senior to face a healthcare crisis where you need, acute rehab, and then you need to wake up and have some documents put in place. You could be a teenager or in your 20s or 30s and have the same wake-up call. But the concepts within elder law are sometimes misunderstood. So in 2 weeks from today, Bob is going to do a show on the basics of elder law. So tune in 2 weeks from today, Saturday the 19th of December, to talk about, we're going to go over that Elder Law 101 concept, start with the basics. So one thing that, I think of brain injuries, and you guys both have that in your title, as something fairly, I don't want to say major, but, a traumatic brain injury. I know that phrase just from rubbing up against the industry. But is there such thing as a non-traumatic brain injury? Like, what's the real difference? I don't know.
There is indeed. So a traumatic brain injury has to be an external force. So your head has to hit something, or something has to hit your head.
Okay.
But a lot of our brain injuries are actually non-traumatic. So there doesn't have to be something that your head hits, but there can be something that affects your brain functioning and your medical status. And that can be brain tumors are considered non-traumatic brain injuries. Encephalopathy, which that is an infection. Yeah.
Can you spell that for me? No, okay.
I can indeed.
Okay, right.
Ooh, spelling bee.
I teach a class, and I actually make them spell it.
Better you than me.
That's on the quiz. But that's actually, the short story is it's an infection or some kind of change to the chemistry of your body that can cause changes with your mental status and your cognition. And that can be even if somebody has a urinary tract infection.
I was going to ask that because I'm familiar with that concept. Right. We have, family members come into us all the time and they say, oh, the doctor says my mom's got this really bad dementia all of a sudden. And then 2 weeks later we hear, oh, it wasn't dementia after all. It was a UTI.
Mm-hmm. That's encephalopathy. Okay. Exactly. So it can be, acute and then can resolve. But for some of our patients and clients that might be a little bit more medically advanced, it might not resolve to the full functioning they were prior to. So that's an educational piece, too, to know that, hopefully it will resolve for you, but it might not, and learning to work with that and then returning home with that kind of deficit you might have, too.
But fair to say that the chance or the degree of resolution is going to be increased by acute rehab versus
definitely.
Subacute, where you may not get anything
right.
In that area. That's very interesting because I never thought of, a tumor or an encephalopathy. Say it again for me.
Encephalopathy.
Okay, I was getting there. As being, or what I would think of as an infection, UTI, as being a brain injury. But I guess if it affects your cognition and your function, then obviously it is. So the last 10 minutes or so that we have, I want to focus on what it, we've talked a lot about being independent and being autonomous as a senior or even as a non-senior, but as a person who's dealing with a healthcare issue or crisis. What does it mean when you guys say you're preparing people to go home? Is that really the goal of the hospice? Is it to make people better or to make them better and get them home? Or is that
absolutely. We want to get people better, not just send them home as they were.
Right.
So we're aiming to, make people be better in every aspect that we evaluate them on. So when every person comes into the hospital, we use a scale to kind of grade how they're doing. And then we hope to see improvements in that scale when they end up leaving our hospital.
Okay. And that's like a multifaceted scale?
Absolutely.
Okay. Not a scale like I'm scared of during the holiday season.
No, not that one.
Okay.
So it covers things like being able to eat, being able to toilet, being able to walk.
Being cognizant enough to know if you have a medical emergency to call 911. So it's not even just a physical component, having the mental flexibility to be able to problem solve and to, live independently and know, if this happens to me, I have to do this.
Right.
That's a portion too.
Mm-hmm. But our goal is to get you home. And if it's not that you're independent necessarily on your own, that we can find a way that you can get home. Whether it be that your family members are there to help you out with things, or that we find a way to coordinate follow-up services with you, with you as you go home, whether that be home health aides or continuing physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy when you are discharged to go home.
Okay. So the goal of going home is part of getting better. It's not just let's get people back into their house. It's let's assess, the success of. I think, Kristen, you had a good point, which is you have to also be realistic about how much of a resolution or recovery you can have in certain circumstances.
Right.
So to risk assess with an eye towards getting home, becoming independent, but maybe with that educational component about what your life is going to be like at home now versus before. Is that a fair way to say it?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
With compensatory strategies or, a counseling component, knowing that, you can do the best you can with whatever time you have, especially in the rehab hospital.
Okay. Which is a similar concept to what we do in our law office, which is we can tell people about how the documents work and so forth, but you've got to be realistic about using them. In other words, creating a power of attorney as an emergency plan is a good idea, but you have to be realistic about when it's time to use it. So doing acute rehab and learning your limitations, and then learning what you need from an educational standpoint to assist you is the same thing as getting a power of attorney and knowing what you can still do for yourself or where it might be appropriate and beneficial to you from a stress standpoint to bring in the loved one or the professional that you've named to assist you from time to time. So I think that's an important concept to point out as well. Now, the discharge process, is that something that you involve family members with, or is it
Absolutely.
Okay.
So if a family member is going to be kind of more responsible for our patient, we'll have them come in to the education groups. For example, with our brain injury education group, oftentimes family is very, very involved with.
Tell me about the education group. Is that something separate and apart from the therapy, or it's considered part of the like educational therapy?
It is considered part of therapy.
As one of those hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's not every single day that we have that group. It's once a week.
Once a week.
Okay.
But it talks about the brain, the anatomy of the brain, and it goes into the kind of medical terminology that you may have heard around your brain injury, whether it be a subarachnoid hemorrhage or a subdural hematoma. We kind of break down what the heck that means.
More spelling words for me. Okay.
So we'll go into that, and then we'll go into some of the effects that a brain injury can have on your psychosocial health, on your movement, and then beyond that, what kind of resources you have at our hospital, and then beyond that, when you go home.
Okay. And who teaches that kind of those
That'd
groups?
be us.
So
You're looking at them.
All right.
Jess and Kristen.
Or you're listening to them.
Gotcha. So, all right, that's interesting. So that's separate and apart from pure speech pathology and pure physical therapy.
And almost every one of our disease-specific diagnoses, we have a cardiac education group. We have a pulmonary education group. We have a stroke education group. We have
diabetes.
Yep, and we have diabetes education. In addition, we also have, I think, our total knee and total hip and spine education groups, too. So.
Important stuff, because as you can see from my lack of knowledge and lack of vocabulary in the area, that and I'm a professional who deals with people going through a lot of this stuff all the time. Just because you had a stroke doesn't mean you know anything about, what a stroke really is or how it affects you. Just because you had a knee replacement doesn't mean
or why you got it.
Right, exactly. So I think that's really interesting. I almost would like to sit in on one of those by choice, if possible. Okay. And so, is there anything else you guys want to cover while we're on the air? I don't know if I missed anything in terms of Healthsouth. One thing I wanted to ask, because, we're Monmouth and Ocean County centered on this show, even though we're all over the country on WOBMAM.com, is each individual hospital, the one in Tinton Falls and the one here. I think I heard somewhere that you're doing an expansion of some type in Toms River. Is that right?
We're having a whole building expansion.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Definitely. A refresh is what we're calling it.
Okay.
Yeah. So our existing building, I believe, is around 50 or so years old. So we're looking to hopefully update the rooms, make the bathrooms bigger, make most of the rooms private rooms as opposed to shared rooms.
Okay.
So that's what we're striving to do in the upcoming months.
So you have a nice new refreshed facility in the next few months. That's great for our listeners here in the Toms River area to know that not only do we have a Healthsouth, an acute rehabilitation hospital available to us, but it's going to be a nice, a refreshed version. And in Tinton Falls, is that a little bit smaller hospital?
Tinton Falls does have less beds.
Okay.
60 or so, I believe.
Versus, what, about twice that in Toms River?
We have 99 beds currently.
Okay. But both good sizes, and obviously we've talked a lot about the different ways to seek out the services of a rehabilitation hospital, to seek out Healthsouth. It's available to you, and those beds are there.
And for your snowbird listeners, we do have hospitals in Florida.
Okay, all right, there you go. And so if you do have a chronic, if you have a Parkinson's or you have a COPD, and you happen not to be in New Jersey when your meds are adjusted and you have a change, or you start to notice a differing, frustrating component of your symptoms that you don't know how to deal with it, doesn't really matter, because Healthsouth is a leader in the industry, and in 29 states plus Puerto Rico, you can seek them out all over the country. And what is the third one in New Jersey? I can't remember.
Vineland.
Okay, so you kind of have north, central, south.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Again, if you have any questions or think you might be able to benefit from the services of Healthsouth Rehabilitation Hospital of Toms River, they're located at 14 Hospital Drive right here in Toms River, right by Community Medical, and the phone number is 732-244-3100. A good contact there is Angie. You ladies, correct me if I say it wrong. Pabon?
Yeah,
pretty good. All right.
Right,
and Angie, everybody at Healthsouth probably knows Angie. So ask for her by name. I have a number here. It's okay to give this number, 732-505-5094. Angie really helped me learn some of the concepts that are involved with the Healthsouth Rehabilitation Hospital, what they do and how it's different from a nursing home. Because we have a lot of clients who the nursing home is the boogeyman. That's where they don't want to be and don't want to wind up. And so this is just another tool in the toolkit, in addition to having legal documents to, to take autonomy and say, hey, here's another way I can remain independent. All right, so we're out of time for today. I want to thank all of our listeners and our two callers for calling in, and especially to Jess and Kristen for taking some time out this morning and educating us about what they do and what the hospital does. Thank you, ladies.
Thanks for having us.
Again, you've been listening live to Inside the Law, 1160 WOBM AM Ocean County and 1310 AM in Monmouth County. And I want to wish everybody a happy holiday season. And, be safe, be smart out there, and enjoy the holidays. And as always, you stay classy, New Jersey. Thanks for stopping by.